How's it going, guys? My name is Lewis, and welcome to episode 2 of Discontinued Nostalgia. In the previous episode, I went through a few discontinued TV channels that have already met their demise, and based on the comments from the first episode, many of you wanted me to cover even more channels. So, in today's episode, I thought I'd do that. To help out with this video, I brought in the YouTuber Lula Loopsy, who does videos on 2000s nostalgia. She has a bit more knowledge when it comes to some of these topics on here, so I'm glad she came on board to lend a hand. But yeah, anyways, if you'd like to hear me discuss other topics of discontinued media, just let me know in the comments. Without further ado, this is episode 2 of Discontinued Nostalgia, TV Channels Part 2.
Watch college basketball and over 80 other live sporting events in amazing 3D. Contact your video provider or visit espn.com/3D.
In 2009, the release of James Cameron's Avatar marked a significant milestone in the world of cinema, or so we thought. The movie's innovative 3D camera technology provided a level of immersion unprecedented in films seen before it. Seeing that Avatar had become one of the highest grossing films of all time, many thought that 3D would be the next big thing, and soon several companies would jump on the trend of 3D. You had Sony developing 3D TV, Nintendo with the 3DS, and even the government of South Korea investing millions in this new technology. Companies like DirecTV and Fox Sports would announce the addition of 3D channels to their cable lineup. However, the most aggressive to push 3D into homes had to be ESPN 3D. This was an ESPN-based channel that broadcast sports in 3D, and they would dub themselves as the industry's first 3D network. While it may have seemed that they were trying to profit from this trend, ESPN had actually been experimenting with 3D broadcasting 2 years before the launch of the channel, making them one of the earliest pioneers of this new tech. In order for the broadcasting to work, TV crews would require a dedicated 3D camera crew, where they would need additional space to provide 3D-friendly angles. This technology would be showcased in late 2009 at the University of Southern California and a few movie theaters where they played a game between USC and Ohio, with all the viewers in attendance wearing advanced 3D glasses. When ESPN 3D was unveiled in January of 2010, the network announced that it would broadcast 85 live events throughout the year, starting on June 11th with the inaugural broadcast being the first round of the 2010 World Cup between South Africa and Mexico. Additionally, the channel would feature other sporting events such as college basketball, football, and the Summer X Games. Following their announcement, DirecTV became the first cable provider to feature ESPN 3D. This was followed by Comcast and AT&T U-verse, offering to carry the channel a few months later. But just as everyone was signing onto the service, ESPN 3D would see signs of problems 5 months into launch when a network executive for ESPN admitted that there was very little indication that the channel would continue in its current form or indeed even survive. While it was widely reported that viewership for ESPN 3D was low, its low viewership was a symptom of a much larger problem within the 3D TV industry. You see, when ESPN 3D launched in 2010, it launched at a time when most Americans were transitioning from analog TV to HD TV, as it had become more affordable for the average household. I could attest to this as my family got our first flat screen for the living room in like 2011, and we were pretty flabbergasted by how clear the screen looked in its 720p glory. Now we have a 4K screen, so it's pretty insane how TV has evolved in the last 15 years. So when 3D TV started appearing on store shelves in around late 2009 at astronomical prices, this put the future of 3D channels at a significant disadvantage because people were not buying the TVs that were compatible with these channels. Even with cheaper options like converter boxes, the limited selection of 3D programs didn't justify the high cost for most consumers. 2011 onward was signaled a slow death of 3D TV. According to the Associated Press, ESPN 3D coordinating producer Phil Orland said that fewer than 115,000 Americans tuned into 3D channels at any one time. He added on to say that audiences were so small that they couldn't be measured by Nielsen ratings. This low turnout rate would result in the trend for 3D to fade away. The reason for it not catching on and subsequently being cancelled was that 3D TVs were simply too expensive to produce. People also found the glasses too uncomfortable for long-time usage. And speaking of the glasses, I strongly believe that this concept would also face logistical challenges in places like sports bars, since you need like hundreds of these high-tech glasses for everyone to have a good experience. Simply put, the cost was too high and there was little consumer demand. In June of 2013, it would be announced that ESPN 3D would be shutting down by the end of the year. The reason behind this decision was that the 3D category had failed to attract a broad audience and struggled to gain traction with viewers as the adaptation of 3D TVs had yet to meet expectations. Additionally, 4K resolution had become the latest trend, and ESPN believed that putting their 3D resources into 4K programming would be a wise decision. Toon Disney originally launched as a commercial-free network in 1998 to celebrate the 15th anniversary of Disney Channel. The channel's lineup consisted of shows from Disney's past, including old theatrical shorts and animated shows from Deke Entertainment and the Disney Afternoon block. Although no original programming was ever made, in 2002, Toon Disney acquired the rights to air new episodes of pre-existing shows from the Disney Afternoon and One Saturday Morning blocks. These included Timon and Pumbaa, Teacher's Pet, The Weekenders, House of Mouse, and Fillmore. With the variety of shows, Toon Disney would add blocks to incorporate the lineup better, such as The Magical World of Toons, Hanging with the Heroes, and Chilling with the Villains. However, a tonal shift in programming occurred when in 2004, Toon Disney rebranded itself and introduced a new block that would eventually take over the network, Jetix. Jetix was an action-oriented block that featured shows from Saban Entertainment, Marvel, and foreign anime. Basically Disney's answer to Toonami, because it seemed like everyone was trying to replicate that. Jetix's creation was the result of the Walt Disney Company purchasing Fox Family worldwide in 2001. This gave Disney control of the Fox Family channel, where it would later be rebranded to ABC Family, and is now currently freeform. This also gave Disney the rights to over 6,500 episodes of animated and live-action family programming from Saban Entertainment. The content included popular shows like Power Rangers, Digimon, Beetleborgs, and Spider-Man, all of which were later included in the Jetix lineup. When the block launched in 2004, it premiered on ABC Family as a morning block until 2006 and as a primetime block on Toon Disney. As the years went on, Jetix continued to be a big draw for Toon Disney, and soon original programming would be made for the block, such as Witch, Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go, Get Ed, and my favorite show, Yin Yang Yo. I'd also like to mention Puka. It wasn't a Jetix original, but definitely a staple of the block. As for Toon Disney, rather than producing original content, it became the dumping ground for animated shows that had already aired on Disney Channel. By late 2006, Jetix was expanded to include an overnight and early morning block, occupying more channel space and extending its broadcast hours to over 14 hours a day on weekdays and 20 hours on weekends, which must have gave new viewers the interpretation that Jetix was the main channel name. Despite Jetix being a popular block amongst fans, it would be decided in August of 2008 by the Disney ABC television group that Toon Disney and Jetix would merge to form Disney XD. This move was done as higher-ups believed the main Disney channel was primarily aimed at girls, so they wanted to create a male-focused but female-inclusive counterpart with Disney XD. Another possible reason for the merger could be that the Toon Disney and Jetix name had some limitations in regards to live action. Perhaps they thought that the new name could still give it a bit of edge and still help it introduce live action content to the network. This makes more sense knowing that Disney XD's first batch of live action shows, such as Aaron Stone, were all live action and boy focused. With the rebrand on the horizon, the programming directors at Toon Disney just said fuck it and had given up on the Toon part of their name when shows like The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody would premiere on the channel. You know it's over when live action shows start airing on a cartoon-based channel. Okay, forget what I just said, you know what I mean. Toon Disney would shut down as part of Jetix on midnight February 13, 2009, with the last programming being the Incredible Hulk episode titled Doomed. Fitting title, I know. Following that, Disney XD would officially launch and start off with an episode of Phineas and Ferb. As of 2024, Disney XD still exists and has even outlasted Toon Disney's lifespan. Personally me, I always preferred watching Disney XD over Toon Disney. I might be saying that because it was already geared towards me, but back in 2009, it was the best option as far as what was on at the time. Especially when they were airing Naruto Shippuden. This was following the cancellation of Toonami, and Naruto Shippuden had just released, so this was like my only way of watching it. Alright guys, while we're still on the topic of discontinued kids channels, I'd like to pass off the mic to Lula Loopsy, as she's way more knowledgeable on these next two entries. Take it away, Lula.
PBS Kids Sprout.
Presented in partnership with your PBS station.
Let's grow.
Thanks, Lewis. Now, you may have heard of PBS Kids. It's arguably one of the most iconic kids channels of all time. But despite that channel being aimed at kids, did you know that they actually made a venture into content targeted at preschoolers? Titled PBS Kids Sprout, the channel began as initially an exclusively on-demand service before debuting as a TV channel. And not just any TV channel, but the first ever 24-hour preschool channel in September of 2005. And despite PBS being behind the channel, it was very much a joint effort. Sprout was a partnership between Comcast, Sesame Workshop, and HIT Entertainment. Over the years, Sprout would become known for its original children's content, like The Sunny Side Up Show, The Goodnight Show, The Pajanimals, and Noodle and Doodle. Shows like these are the reason the channel was able to take off in the way it did, I feel, reaching record ratings by 2012 compared to other competitors like Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, or Cartoon Network, and of course, so many more. I think why these shows really stood out is shortly after Sprout launched, Andrew Beecham was crowned Senior Vice President of Programming for Sprout, and he's British. This format of children's TV is way more common there, and he was extremely familiar with it. But this channel in general had a ton of international influence. I mean, for starters, there's a double-decker bus in Noodle and Doodle that they ride around visiting kids and doing crafts and things. but Sprout also just happened to air a lot of international shows that they acquired. The ones that come to my brain immediately are those classic British claymation shows like Fireman Sam, Roy the Racing Car, Bob the Builder, and the Rubbadubbers. But the channel was home to tons of nostalgic 2000s cartoons, from Kipper the Dog to Angelina Ballerina. The channel would continue to expand over the years, being included in the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade, and having loads of celebrity guests on the Sunny Side Up show. The Wiggles even became a part of the channel in the spring of 2009, with their own block titled Wiggly Waffle. This was because of competition they had with the Imagination Movers over on Playhouse Disney, another band that had recently gotten their own show on that channel. So as a result, the Wiggles ended up moving to Sprout. With all that being said, the downfall of this channel is really weird because they were actually at their height of popularity when the noticeable changes started to be implemented to the channel. And during this time, a lot of popular shows stopped airing on the channel, like Barney, Sesame Street, Thomas and Friends, Bob the Builder, and Super Y. The Sunny Side Up show had also become known as simply Sunny Side Up now, and left the barn to go to a more modern city loft. But the real nail in the coffin would have NBC Universal to blame. To make a long story short, a series of events behind the scenes led to NBC Universal getting full ownership of Sprout by 2013. Comcast claimed a 51% share of NBC Universal, which gave them somewhat control of Sprout. But when Apex Partners sold HIT Entertainment to NBC Universal, they were able to also claim their share of Sprout, and at the same time Sesame Workshop had ended up selling its share to NBC Universal. So obviously they got their share as well, and with that they were eventually able to claim the shares, gaining full 100% control of Sprout. This is the reason that the channel would become known as just Sprout in later years, though that wasn't a very drastic change and people barely noticed if anything, so Sprout continued to be at the height of its popularity. However, when NBC Universal would decide to finally pull the plug, let's just say, and rebrand Sprout to Universal Kids, that's where things started to go downhill. They briefly used Sprout as, the name of the channel's preschool block, launching a new Sunny Side Up style show alongside it called The Sprout House, but that was extremely short-lived, and that show only has one season. And as for the channel as a whole, Universal Kids opted to focus on making their own original content, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but let's just say not the smartest decision when they're trying to rebrand a channel and keep those viewers, because it's just really too drastic of a change. And this did eventually cause them to backpedal a lot, sticking to airing more acquired content in an effort to salvage the channel, and in their defense, that's probably the reason the channel is still around today, so it was a smart decision. But as of May 5th, 2024, Universal Kids is the 108th most popular channel on TV, and watched by a total of 23,000 people, up by 5% last week. So yeah, nowhere near where they were in their prime, but slowly repairing the damage, it seems. Noggin was a kids channel that launched on February 2nd of 1991 as a cable channel with the help of Sesame Workshop, which, you are not mistaken, that name sounds familiar because, they would help with the launch of Sprout just a few short years later. And Noggin, in a strange way, is kind of the reason Sprout, was even created. That's an assumption, by the way, not a fact. I just think because PBS Kids was actively losing viewers to Noggin in the early 2000s, it just played a role in their interest in, investing in content for preschoolers. Anyway, Noggin was advertised as a thinking channel, hence the name Noggin. Am I right? And the goal of the channel was to inspire kids and their creative sides or their imagination, but above all, their channel was meant to be educational, which was the reason that Sesame and Nickelodeon really came together for this project. At the time, they both had been working towards getting educational channels off the ground and decided it would be smarter if they just worked together. For some context, Sesame Workshop wanted a channel of their own specifically due to how their shows had been treated by networks, how they had been often passed over in favor of shows that were maybe more commercially successful. And although Noggin had started with a wider range when it came to their target audience, they are best known for their preschool content, which would become the channel's, main target audience by the early 2000s. And over the years, the channel has had a lot of mascots, from Fred to Feet Face, but the channel by far is best known for the dynamic duo of Moose and Z. Introduced in 2003, Moose and Z would host the daytime block on Noggin. There are over 100 animated shorts of the two friends from their time hosting on the channel. And basically, Moose was meant to serve as an educator of sorts, teaching the kids lessons in between shows, while Z kind of represented the, audience watching and learned along with us. That same year, the channel would really become what most people remember it as, with their content being separated by a daytime block aimed at preschoolers, and then switching to The N in the evenings, which was aimed at an older teen audience. No shade to The N, but I definitely understand why it would eventually become its own channel, because going from, preschool aimed content to teen aimed content is pretty drastic, and it wasn't like an Adult Swim situation where they wait until like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., sometimes later to switch. The N would come on around like 5 or 6 p.m., which is still pretty early and when kids are still awake. In the long run, it just was a decision that wasn't smart for the channel, and it caused channels like Sprout, which ran for 24 hours, to steal their viewership. Anyway, right before all this happened in August of 2002, Sesame Workshop would make their departure, selling 50% of their stake, meaning that Noggin, the channel, was entirely under Nickelodeon and or Paramount's control now. However, they would continue a sort of like co-production agreement with Noggin for many years afterwards, just because they had a role in a lot of the content that was airing and a lot of the shows. That's why it only seemed logical in Nickelodeon's eyes, once Sesame Workshop had made their departure, to really go all in on Nick Jr., which was a block that had ran on the channel for many years. And Nickelodeon would go on to state specifically it was to bring the channel in line with Nickelodeon's brand identity. And once Noggin became Nick Jr., initially, despite the change, the content really remained pretty much the same. But it became clear with time that that was really only to ease viewers into this change. So just 3 short years later, Moose and Z would officially be canned in the spring of 2012, with absolutely no warning to parents, by the way, which is what caused a ton of backlash online, if not more than if they had announced this. Ultimately, Nick Jr. would stay despite the outrage, and it still remains to this day. There was an attempt to revive Noggin via a streaming service in 2015, bringing back not only Moose and Z, but tons of Noggin's older programming. However, this was unfortunately also short-lived. The app underwent design changes in 2019. This not only marked the end for Noggin's first logo after 20 years, but Moose and Z were once again retired for good this time. And the changes would continue in 2020 when a lot of this older content that had been, put on the app when it launched was removed, most likely in favor of newer, more popular titles. So funny enough, we're literally back to where we started. And as of 2024, unfortunately, things don't get any better when the whole Noggin team was suddenly laid off back in January. Paramount Global had been amidst laying off around 800 employees at the time, and Noggin just happened to be targeted. Despite I talk about this in my video about Noggin, they had just added a whole new virtual world to the app in December. I definitely had my own doubts about the app when researching, but I really didn't think they would be shutting down in this type of way and that it would be anytime soon. But the service is no longer taking new subscribers ever since that announcement, and will be officially shutting down on July 2nd of this year, which current subscribers learned via an email where they reassure you you can just subscribe to Paramount Plus instead to continue to have access to all your child's favorite shows. Yeah, you just laid off everyone. That totally didn't happen.
Anyways, that's all I got for you. Thanks again to Lewis for having me join him, and I make nostalgic content of my own on my channel Lula Loopsy if you're looking for more.
Out of all the TV channels I've done extensive research on, this one stands out to me as one of the most tragic and disturbing stories in TV history that I've ever heard. Brace yourself everyone, for the Z Channel. The Z Channel was a Los Angeles-based premium paid TV channel that played a wide assortment of movies, similar to HBO, marking them as one of the earliest competitors in the realm of premium television. Not much is known about its early history, but according to an LA Times article from 2004, during its first few years, it only aired 2 movies a week, which didn't sound like a lot, but still, it was enough for people to recommend the channel to movie lovers. Z Channel would achieve great success thanks to the mind and ambition of Jerry Harvey. Harvey was known for having a keen eye on movies. He just knew what movies were good and what movies were shit. Keep in mind that Blockbuster hadn't yet been established until 1985, so for Jerry to have a ton of knowledge on movies gave the guy a reputation. His critiques towards film would get Jerry hired into programming when in 1979, he wrote an angry letter to Select TV, a now defunct TV movie channel, telling the network that their programming sucked, and they pretty much agreed. So much so that they hired him as an assistant film programmer. By 1981, he would switch to the Z Channel and become the network's program director. This position pretty much gave him the liberty to air whatever he pleases, and thanks to his vast knowledge of movies and his quirky personality, Harvey would build a loyal fanbase that helped make the Z Channel into a 24/7 channel. Another way that Z Channel would connect with its fans was with their program guides, which included articles, movie reviews, and Q&As from their readers. Not only was he a good movie reviewer, but he was also an innovator in the evolution of premium television by popularizing the use of letterbox format, a technique that presented a 16:9 image on a traditional 4:3 screen. While commonplace today, this innovation was groundbreaking at the time, enhancing viewers' cinematic experience. Moreover, the Z Channel popularized the use of director's cut by presenting the movies in their uncut form. This would gain significant attention when on Christmas Eve of 1982, the channel aired the full, uncut 219-minute version of Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. Despite the film being considered one of the worst movies of all time at one point and having bombed at the box office, it became one of the most viewed movies to have ever aired on Z Channel. This success greatly benefited the premium service and helped it become one of the largest premium cable channels in the LA area, surpassing the amount of cable subscribers of both HBO and Showtime combined, boasting 80,000 subscribers. Other films that struggled to find an audience, such as Once Upon a Time in America, Das Boot, and 1900, initially struggled to find an audience but would find newfound popularity thanks to the Z Channel. Jerry would remain as a program director until 1988 and would introduce viewers to several types of films such as foreign films, obscure indies, silent classics, and their most popular feature, softcore porn. Yeah, Jerry was really into movies, guys. They would also have marathons in the form of film festival blocks based on whatever genre they were feeling, which must have added a layer of excitement for its viewers. But while it looked like everything was good on the surface, inside the mind of Jerry was a different story. Jerry his entire life was a troubled individual, having grown up in a dysfunctional household with a strict absent father and an emotionally voided mother, along with siblings who he thought both killed themselves. This trauma would make Jerry develop mental health problems and depression, as well as a difficult time finding love. But it was his infatuation with film at an early age that helped him find that escapism. By the mid-80s, Z Channel would peak at close to 100,000 subscribers in the LA area. Still, despite having a loyal fan base, Z Channel was unprofitable because of its high programming costs, and with HBO having a lot more buying power, the future of Z Channel started to look uncertain. So, in September of 1987, the Z Channel was sold to Seattle cable company Group W. The company had ambitious plans to take the Z Channel to the next level and make it national like HBO and Showtime. However, just as plans were going to take off, the stock market would crash in 1987. Because of that, plans to expand the channel would never materialize. Just a few months later, Group W would merge with American Spectacor, which is now known as Comcast Spectacor. Given the growing circumstances of losing money and failing to expand the channel, Z Channel would take a bold approach by including live sports in their lineup, particularly games from LA sports teams. The idea for live sports was suggested by an executive at Spectacor, who also owned an Eastern-based channel named Prism. The channel was basically the same as Z, but it also aired sporting events. While this move seemed good on paper, it would severely backfire for Z Channel and lead to an antitrust lawsuit by HBO and 4 other movie studios. You might be thinking, wait, why is HBO suing Z Channel? They're much bigger. They also air sports. Like, what do they have to do with this? Well, let me try to sum everything up. For Z Channel to be defined as a premium channel, they would have to sign licensing agreements with other movie studios, which had clauses to not air commercials on their network. The same also applies to HBO, as they too have clauses in their licensing agreements that prevent movies from airing on other stations that feature ads. To me, honestly, it just seems that HBO, now in a more prominent position, wanted to take the channel out of the race once and for all. Z Channel would try renegotiating its agreements with its distributors, but they would fall short. Z alleges that they were unsuccessful in negotiations mainly due to HBO insisting to their distributors to comply with their no licensing to advertisers agreement. You might be thinking, what was going to Jerry's head and the mounting pressure on his prized Z Channel? Well, in a tragic turn of events, in April of 1988, Jerry would unalive his wife Derry with a handgun and then point the gun at himself. Yeah, I know, this took a completely dark turn. While everyone was at shock for what Jerry did, they never pointed the blame for his work being done at Z, but rather his demons getting the best of him. Jerry's death, along with the mounting lawsuit from HBO, would be the final nail in the coffin for Z Channel, as the man who built the channel was now gone. After Harvey's death, live sports would finally be broadcast on the channel, and it was here where Z Channel would see a slow death. By 1989, the channel would be sold to Cablevision and NBC, where it was rebranded as Sports Channel Los Angeles, shifting the channel's focus entirely to sports, erasing the legacy of Z Channel and being forgotten to time. It wasn't until 2004 when the story of Z Channel and Jerry Harvey's life was revisited in a documentary titled Z Channel: A Magnificent Obsession, featuring Jerry's friends and co-workers. This documentary is where I got most of the information on the history of the network, and it's honestly an interesting look at what could have been another massive cable channel. We could have had Z Max, guys. Overall, man, this sucks. The story of Z Channel and life of Jerry is just tragic. It seemed like the channel was destined for bigger things, but due to unfortunate circumstances, along with Jerry's unstable mental health, it just came crashing down. Z Channel died when Jerry Harvey died. By the way, this is in no way me sympathizing for this guy, fuck him. What he did was heinous and unforgivable, but it's impossible not to mention him when it comes to the vision and contributions of the Z Channel. While it never went national, his work at Z Channel introduced viewers in the LA area to a diverse array of films, including such renowned directors such as Alexander Payne and Quentin Tarantino, so the more you know. Oh boy, so where do we begin? G4 kind of started all over the place, but I guess we can start in 1994. Ziff Davis, a well-known company that published hobbyist magazine, including PC Magazine, entered the TV business and produced a show for CNBC called The Personal Computing Show. I really couldn't find much info about this show, but basically it was your typical 90s computer show, covering topics on tech and personal computing. Once the show was cancelled, Ziff Davis was once again asked by NBC to produce a new show for a new channel that would focus on tech and news, MSNBC. You might be thinking, wait, like the political channel? Yeah. Before they made politics and Chris Matthews a core staple of their branding, MSNBC was originally a joint venture between Microsoft and NBC, where they tried to appeal to a tech-savvy audience by providing a blend of traditional news and internet-related content. One of the inaugural programs to premiere on MSNBC was a show called The Site, hosted by Soledad O'Brien. The show would go on to cover topics about web design, gaming, website reviews, the latest news on Silicon Valley, as well as talk about the social implications of the tech revolution. One of the most unique parts of the show was where O'Brien would interact with a CGI character named Dev Null, who was voiced and animated in a motion capture suit by Leo Laporte. Definitely way ahead of its time considering that VTubing is all the rage these days. For any longtime fans of tech TV, this would be one of the earliest incarnations of what would later become the screensavers. It sounds completely absurd that a show like this would even air on MSNBC, but I guess the channel had initially a different mission statement. Even though the show was well received and won 2 Emmys, the site was preempted for 2 weeks and subsequently cancelled in 1997 due to low ratings. This was following Princess Diana's death, where the news coverage gave the network a massive ratings boost. This newfound success, coupled with MSNBC's failure to attract a tech-based audience, led to the network shifting to an all-news format. Despite this cancellation, Ziff Davis was still motivated to push forward, and in 1998, Tech TV was launched, although it started under the name ZDTV, with the ZD being the initials for Ziff Davis. ZDTV had ambitious plans for the channel, believing that it could do to tech what CNN did to news and ESPN did to sports. The network was also located in a good area too. It chose San Francisco as home for an HQ because it was in proximity to Silicon Valley. It's also interesting to note that although ZDTV was the only tech-based channel, it wasn't the only one with that idea. It was said that CNET had plans for a 24/7 channel, but would eventually abandon those plans after a lack of advertising interest. Instead, CNET would just distribute their shows on channels including the Sci-Fi Channel, USA Network, and KPIX, so perhaps this was a warning of not trying to enter this cable business. ZDTV faced several challenges but managed to produce great shows with amazing hosts. Among ZDTV's flagship programs was The Screensavers. It was originally hosted by Leo Laporte and Kate Botello, but it wasn't until 2000 when Patrick Norton took Kate's place. Much like the site, The Screensavers covered topics on computers, gadgets, and internet culture. Another popular show from the network would be GameSpot TV, which was later changed to Extended Play and is now X-Play. This was a video game focused show featuring game reviews, previews, and interviews from in the gaming industry. It was hosted by Adam Sessler and co-hosted by Lauren Fielder and Kate Botello until Morgan Webb became the permanent co-host. Other shows that aired during the early years of ZDTV were Internet Tonight, Call for Help, and Fresh Gear. Unfortunately, as CNET predicted, a venture like this had difficulties finding advertisers, and the network was deemed unprofitable. Just 1 year into its launch, Ziff Davis would sell 33% of its stake in November of 1999 to Volcon Ventures, an investment firm owned by the co-founder of Microsoft, Paul Allen. Kinda sounds like a good investment on paper. Shortly thereafter, Volcon Ventures purchased the remaining stake of ZDTV, and once the transaction was completed in January of 2000, ZDTV was renamed to Tech TV, and would soon be included in more cable providers. As part of the Tech TV rebrand, the network made a bold shift into live programming in April of 2001, dedicating 9 hours of their schedule to Tech Live, a live 9-hour news block discussing the latest tech and business news. However, this was short-lived due to massive layoffs that occurred during the dot-com bubble burst. Not to mention, the concept of trying to talk about tech news for 9 hours a day sounds like a real chore. Tech Live would soon be chopped up into 3 one-hour shows and later as a single 30-minute programming on tech stories rather than news. It would soon be cancelled. With these layoffs, Tech TV would bring acquired programming to the lineup, including Robot Wars, Tomorrow's World, and a late-night anime block titled Anime Unleashed. This block aired anime with technology and futuristic sci-fi themes to fit the network theme. Just when you think Tech TV was starting to get bigger, they would soon hit a roadblock thanks to Comcast when they were dropped from the cable lineup, presumably to make room for their rival counterpart, G4. Now, before I continue with Tech TV, we need to talk about G4. G4 was launched in 2002 by Charles Hirschborn under the ownership of Comcast. Now, younger people may not remember the early days of G4, I don't, I mostly remember it as the network with endless reruns of Cops and Cheaters, but back in its early days, G4 was 100% about gaming. To hype up its launch, they would host a 7-day marathon of Pong, which is definitely a unique way to hype up the launch of a channel. Its lineup didn't even miss either. Many of G4's early shows were all centered around gaming. These shows included Sweat, a show that covered sports games, Portal, a game on online games, and Blister, a show on action-adventure games. You also had shows like Filter, a countdown show, and Cheat, which provided cheat codes and strategies for video games. One of the more interesting shows I found fascinating was Icons, a documentary anthology series covering topics on the gaming industry. Other shows I have yet to mention are G4TV.com, Cinematech, Game Makers, and Judgment Day. Man, just seeing this really made me wish I was old enough to experience this because it feels like I missed out. Still, even with this amazing lineup of shows, by 2004, G4 was struggling to capture any profit due to a lack of advertisers and needing to be in more households. Comcast really wanted G4 to succeed and they would do anything, even if it meant pulling out the checkbook. So, on May 10th, 2004, Comcast completed the purchase of Tech TV and merged G4 to create G4 Tech TV. Many fans of Tech TV believed that this merger would make G4 Tech TV a hub for gaming and technology content, but in reality, it resulted in the cancellation and departure of many Tech TV shows and staff, including Leo Laporte, who had departed the network due to contract disputes. The Screensavers and X-Play were among the few shows that survived the transition, however, they would be massively altered. After Laporte's departure on the Screensavers, the show started to become less about computers and technology and more about gaming and pop culture. As the months went on, many of Tech TV's employees were either fired or let go, and soon enough, the Screensavers would be cancelled and air its final episode on March 18, 2005, where it was replaced with a new variety show, Attack of the Show, hosted by Kevin Piera and 3 other co-hosts until Olivia Munn became the permanent co-host alongside Kevin. Less than a year after the merger, G4 Tech TV dropped Tech TV from its name and once again referred itself as G4. You might be wondering, what was the point of even acquiring Tech TV in the first place? Long story short, Comcast did the hostile takeover simply for the channel space so that it could expand G4's operations. Although it had the name G4, its identity as a video game TV network would be short-lived thanks to the management shakeup on top of the corporate pyramid. In September of 2005, former Executive Vice President of Marketing for DirecTV, Neil Tiles, would replace Charles Hirschborn as president of G4. Under his leadership, the channel would shift focus from gaming to a male-oriented channel, but with video game content still sprinkled in. The reason for this change is that Tiles believed that guys like to play video games but don't necessarily like to watch people play games, to which, wow, how fucking stupid can you be? Not only did G4 get a new president, but so did its parent company. Enter Ted Harbert. With this new leadership, G4 along the E! Network and Style would have all their production moved to a single location, which meant a further shift from gaming content. In 2006, the Tech TV block Anime Unleashed was removed from the schedule and replaced with a more lowbrow midnight block called Midnight Spank, which was their own Adult Swim. Midnight Spank would include more mature themed shows like Code Monkeys, Ninja Warrior, Happy Tree Friends, and Cinematech Nocturnal Emissions. This was basically the same as Cinematech but with tits. Unfortunately, the block didn't capture interest and was discontinued by 2008. After this, G4 had started to cut back on programming. Instead of developing new shows, they focused on acquiring more syndicated shows such as Lost and Heroes. As for current programming, X-Play would be reduced to 3 days a week and Attack of the Show would be reduced to 4. These budget cuts really wouldn't help G4 and it would cause ratings to drop. Because of this, in 2010, DirecTV would drop G4 from the cable lineup. Pretty ironic considering that G4 had acquired Tech TV in the first place to expand to DirecTV, but instead it killed both networks. Things would continue to go into freefall mode when in 2012, Adam Sessler and Kevin Piera parted ways with G4. Because of this, X-Play and Attack of the Show, 2 of their oldest and last bits of original programs, were cancelled. Originally, this was done as part of a restructuring strategy to rebrand G4 into the Esquire network, a network geared towards men's lifestyle. This would be announced on G4's website, claiming that the channel will relaunch starting on April 22nd, 2013. Yet when that day came, G4 remained as is. It would later be reported by The Hollywood Reporter that plans for G4 rebranding to the Esquire network were scrapped and handed down to the Style network. This was because Style was in more homes than G4, which already had a low viewership due to the network being taken off DirecTV. G4 by this point was already on life support. Almost all cable providers had abandoned it and the network had lost syndication rights to Cops and Cheaters, leaving the network with only reruns of past G4 shows. By this point it was just so over. On New Year's Eve, G4 would go off the air with a final game of Pong. After a few seconds, the game starts fading into the distance and goes black. And G4, as you knew it, was dead. Or so you thought.
I see the sad faces, and I'm confused because it's supposed to be happy. It's a reunion.
We made a horrible, horrible mistake.
During the virtual streaming event of Comic-Con at Home on July 24, 2020, a teaser trailer was released announcing the return of G4. G4's Twitter account, as well as the Twitter accounts for Attack of the Show and X-Play were also reactivated, hinting at their return. The teaser takes us to what appears to be a warehouse filled with props and a TV screen still playing the same game of Pong from when the network closed in 2014, closing off with a 2021 date and a message saying, "We never stop playing." Before the relaunch, G4 teased its next phase with a holiday reunion special in November of 2020, featuring many of the core G4 hosts. The special included skits, interviews, and a look back at the channel's iconic moments. Towards the end, WWE superstar Xavier Woods would crash the reunion special and announce himself as one of the new hosts of G4. Definitely a good addition to the team if I say so myself. Things would continue to look good for G4 when it was announced that the channel would return to cable and plan to create platform-specific content for social media and YouTube. This return to cable also meant the return of fan-favorite shows including X-Play and Attack of the Show. Both new and returning hosts were also announced, such as Kevin Piera, Adam Sessler, Olivia May, and Frostgrim. More on Frost later. G4 would add fan-favorite shows like Ninja Warrior and Arena back on the schedule and include 1-hour compilations of Scott the Woz and Smosh. YouTube content on cable. Huh, interesting. I'm sure under the leadership of the old G4 crew, along with everyone backing it up, nothing could go absolutely wrong, right? After just 11 months on the air, it would be announced that G4 would once again be shutting down. I'm not gonna go into the drama of what happened for the sake of my mental health, but G4 dealt with high production costs combined with low viewership. This, along with the lack of effective leadership and planning, made it a problem for the network to sustain itself for long. And just going deeper into this, it's honestly insane how much money the network was even spending. According to some ex-G4 employees who spoke with the Washington Post, they would spend up to 5 figures for popular Twitch influencers to make brief appearances on G4. Despite these drastic efforts to attract viewers, the channel struggled to draw significant ratings, averaging just 1,000 viewers according to Nielsen ratings. Yes, only 1,000 viewers! Controversially, many point out to this specific moment as to when G4 died. Again. On the January 11th episode of X-Play, Frostgrim will go on a 3-minute rant on sexism within the gaming industry. In it, she blasts the viewers for complaining that she's not as bangable as the previous G4 host, she said that, not me, and emphasizes that the focus should be on the content rather than the viewers' enjoyment of a female host simply because they're not eye candy. This is despite G4 being infamous for doing stuff like this. Frostgrim will end her rant by saying, "If you don't like it, don't watch." However, it appears that many viewers took that advice to heart because on the week of the rant, the G4 YouTube channel had lost over 4,000 subscribers that week. And while it might not sound like a lot, looking at the subscriber graph from Social Blade, it shows the channel never recovered from the Frost incident. And say what you will about the situation, whether you agree with her or not, I really think this was just the wrong place at the wrong time. At the end of the day, people watch G4 to talk about video games, not to be lectured. It's as if I decided to stop making content and just rant about my life's problems. Like no one gives a shit. That being said, G4 would go into damage control and retract on what Frost said by bringing in Amaranth in a bikini. Yeah, because this isn't desperate for ratings. Am I right, guys? Guys, are you watching? Guys? Yet, the damage had already been done, and on November 18, 2022, G4 would once again cease operations, airing another final sign-off bumper, this time of a game of Pong etched onto one of the hosts' foreheads, with the caption reading, "Thanks for watching," and a somewhat depressing voice saying, "I'm at Comic-Con."
I'm at Comic-Con.
I guess G4 isn't coming back a third time, is it? While the return of G4 left a sour taste on viewers, it's interesting to look back at its origins as a tech-based channel to what it eventually became towards the end of its life. Before I end it, I think I should add one last piece of lore to the story of G4. At the end of the last episode of the original Attack of the Show, it would be revealed that the events of Tech TV being sold to G4 was all just a dream within Leo Laporte's head, and that Tech TV is still standing strong. So let's just end it with that.
I dreamt that Tech TV was sold to a cable company that had a name that was an obsolete Apple processor, and they moved us all down to Los Angeles. And then we had to stop doing tech news, and we started doing this kind of pop culture nightmare gallery. My Uncle Ted was there. Who cares? It's time to go to work. Hey, what's a hype machine? Did we ever review that? I don't know. You can think about it on the way. Come on. It's about time to start the show.
Well, that was episode 2 of Discontinued Nostalgia. I hope you guys enjoyed that video because let me be real with you guys real quick, that G4 entry took so much time to research. Like the rabbit hole just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper for that one, but I'm just glad it's over. Hopefully I was able to give you a better understanding of it because now we can see why people really resonated with that channel. But yeah, thanks for making it to the end. If you want to see more videos on interesting stuff, go hit that subscribe button. I also have a Patreon if you want to help support the channel. One last thing guys, be sure to check out Lula Loopsy for more nostalgic videos. She was the one behind the Sprout and Noggin entries and also has videos that expand on those topics, so go check them out. Anyways guys, my name is Lewis and I am out.